From ABC News, World News Sunday, here's Sam Duddleson.
For now, the latest from China, where the Chinese Red Cross estimates that between 2,000 and 2,500 people have been killed this weekend as the army moved in to suppress the student demonstrations. Still, the army has not gained complete control. Gary Shepard reports on this weekend's bloody action in Beijing.
It was the swift and terrible ending to the Beijing Spring of 1989. Hundreds of thousands of students and workers and other hopeful Chinese citizens who, through their long demonstration for democracy, had been seeking a peaceful dialogue with the leaders of this vast nation, received instead the harshest of responses to their demands for reform and freedom. Last night, an estimated 30,000 Chinese army troops were sent into the capital to crush what the government called a small band of hooligans and gangsters. Counter-revolutionaries, the government called them, who were attempting to overthrow the communist regime that has ruled this country for the past 40 years. It is difficult not to use the word massacre to describe what happened. The military, moving in armored vehicles, smashed through barricades that had been put up by the protesters and advanced relentlessly toward Tienanmen Square, where for the past several weeks, students had been staging a sit-in demanding the resignation of hardline Premier Li Peng and an end to widespread corruption inside the Chinese government. They fired automatic weapons into crowds of citizens who, for the most part, could fight back with nothing more than rocks and bottles. They fired their weapons even as the mobs were chanting slogans like, "You are the People's Liberation Army and we are the people." They fired their weapons into groups of demonstrators that sometimes numbered in the tens of thousands. There has been no official announcement of casualties. Student leaders claim they are staggering and that the government is attempting to cremate the bodies as quickly as possible so the true number of fatalities will never be known. Some lost their lives when armored personnel carriers and troop trucks simply ran over them. Others were gunned down as they tried to resist the savage show of force. Finally, the troops reached their objective, and in a last-ditch effort, demonstrators tossed firebombs onto the tanks and armored personnel carriers as they rolled into Tienanmen Square. But it didn't take long before the Chinese army had forced thousands of demonstrators to leave their encampment and fall back toward the Beijing Hotel a short distance away. Not all of them were able to escape. Bodies of demonstrators were scattered throughout the 100-acre square, and wounded were carried away to get them out of the line of fire. The military force now holding Tienanmen Square numbers several thousand, including dozens of tanks and other vehicles which have been lined up across Chang'an Boulevard. Even late this morning, the defiant survivors were still attempting to counterattack, commandeering an ambulance, setting it on fire, and aiming it directly at soldiers who had taken up defensive positions down the street. Once again, the army opened fire on the demonstrators, and before it was over, at least 3 more civilians had been killed. Government TV later showed soldiers toppling the Goddess of Democracy statue put up by the students less than a week ago. It was declared a great victory against the counter-revolutionaries, but the announcers reading the news were both wearing black. Today, thousands of curious residents of this city were out on the streets riding past Tienanmen Square and other areas where fighting had taken place. There were plenty of reminders of the desperate struggle.
There is no question that the pro-democracy movement in this country has been dealt a stunning setback by the brutal military assault here this weekend, and it may be a long time before it recovers. But the voices of those who died calling for freedom and liberty are likely to be remembered long after the sounds of the gunfire that attempted to silence them have faded away. Gary Shepard, ABC News, Beijing.